In the 1940s, Russian scientists conducted an experiment on a group of prisoners of war, aiming to keep them awake for 15 days using an experimental gas that supposedly eliminated the need for sleep. The prisoners were locked in a sealed chamber, and scientists monitored their vital signs and behavior through a system of cameras and microphones. At first, the prisoners seemed fine, although they argued among themselves and showed signs of paranoia. However, as the days passed, his behavior became increasingly erratic and violent. On the 9th day, one of the prisoners began to scream incessantly for hours, until his voice became so weak that he could barely be heard. Most disturbingly, at the same time, other prisoners began tearing at their skin with their nails, tearing at their flesh in a frantic attempt to escape the chamber or themselves. When the scientists finally decided to open the chamber on the 14th day, they found a horrendous scene. One of the prisoners had died, and the others were severely mutilated, having self-inflicted wounds so deep that their internal organs were exposed. The survivors, who barely looked human, begged the scientists to leave them inside the chamber and resume the gas supply. They preferred madness to death, or perhaps they had crossed a threshold where horror was their only reality. Although many believe that this story is just an urban legend, it has become one of the most terrifying stories in internet culture. In the 1990s, a family moved into an old house in a small town. Shortly after moving in, they began to notice strange things. Footsteps in the attic when no one was there, doors that closed on their own, and the constant feeling of being watched. One night, the mother of the family woke up suddenly, feeling a presence in the room. Opening his eyes, he saw a dark figure standing at the foot of his bed, motionless and silent. The figure looked like a man, but its face was completely covered by shadows. Fear paralyzed her, and after what seemed like an eternity, the figure disappeared. The family tried to ignore the events, but the appearances of the shadow man became more frequent. The children began to have recurring nightmares and spoke of a dark man watching them while they slept. Finally, the family decided to research the history of the house. They discovered that, many years before, a man had lived there and had been accused of witchcraft. He was said to have been a hermit, rejected by the community, and to have made a pact with dark forces. The townspeople believed that his spirit had been trapped in the house, unable to find rest. Frightened by what they discovered, the family decided to move, and after leaving the house, the paranormal phenomena stopped. However, the legend of the shadow man still persists in the town, and some believe that his spirit continues to roam, looking for new victims. In 1970, a young nurse named Donna received a rag doll as a gift from her mother. The doll, which had an innocent appearance, was placed in Donna's room. However, soon after, she and her roommate, Angie, began to notice strange things. The doll seemed to change position on its own, and on several occasions they found it in a different room than where they had left it. Things got worse when they started finding handwritten notes around the house saying, "Help us," or "Help Lou." Lou was a close friend of Donna and Angie. The most terrifying thing occurred when Lou, who had always felt that there was something evil about the doll, was attacked by an invisible force while he was alone in the house. He felt a sharp pain in his chest, and when he looked at himself, he saw that he had deep scratches, as if something had attacked him. Desperate, Donna and Angie decided to seek help. They contacted a medium, who told them that the doll was possessed by the spirit of a girl named Annabelle Higgins, who had tragically died in the place where they now lived. The spirit was supposedly seeking the company of Donna and Angie, but the medium warned them that it was not a benign spirit. Finally, they decided to contact paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. After examining the doll, the Warrens concluded that it was not the spirit of a girl, but a demon using the doll as a conduit to attract human victims. The Warrens took the doll away to prevent it from causing further damage. Annabelle was placed in a safe location within the Warrens' occult museum, where she remains encased in a glass box, supposedly blessed by a priest to contain her evil. Despite being sealed, Annabelle is said to still be extremely dangerous. Annabelle's story has become legendary and has inspired several horror films. But for those who know it closely, it's more than just a story. It's a warning about the dark power that can inhabit seemingly innocent objects. Highway 16, also known as the Highway of Tears, is a stretch of highway in the northwestern region of Canada that has been the scene of mysterious disappearances and murders for decades. Since the 1970s, more than 30 women, mostly young Indigenous women, have disappeared or been found dead along this highway, and many of these cases remain unsolved. The disappearances began to gain attention when Indigenous women from local communities began disappearing while walking, hitchhiking, or simply while traveling on the highway. Investigations have been limited, and although some cases have been solved, most remain a mystery. The terror surrounding Highway 16 comes not only from the large number of disappearances, but also from the fact that many of the victims appear to have disappeared without a trace, suggesting the possible presence of one or more serial killers who have never been found. Captured. The victims' families and Indigenous communities have fought for years to have the problem recognized and the disappearances properly investigated. However, a lack of resources and the remoteness of the region have meant that these crimes remain largely unanswered. The Highway of Tears has inspired documentaries, books and awareness campaigns, and remains a grim reminder of the lives lost and the lack of justice for victims and their families. Although the road is still in use, many consider it a cursed place, where the shadows of the past continue to haunt those who tr. Anneliese Michel was a young German woman who, in the 1970s, became the center of one of the most controversial and terrifying exorcism cases in history. Raised in a devout Catholic family, Anneliese began experiencing strange episodes at age 16, including severe seizures and hallucinations. Doctors initially diagnosed epilepsy, and Anneliese was treated with medication. However, his symptoms worsened, and he began to exhibit behavior that his parents and priests interpreted as signs of demonic possession. Anneliese claimed to hear voices telling her that she was cursed and would rot in hell. He also began rejecting religious objects, drinking his own urine, eating insects, and displaying unusual strength. Her family, convinced she was possessed, sought help from the Catholic Church. After much prodding, the church finally approved an exorcism in 1975, which was performed by two priests, Father Arnold Renz and Pastor Ernst Alt. Over the next 10 months, Anneliese was subjected to 67 exorcism sessions, some of which lasted up to 4 hours. In audio recordings of the sessions, Anneliese can be heard shouting, speaking in tongues, and holding conversations in multiple voices that priests believed belonged to demons such as Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, and others. During this time, Anneliese stopped eating, convinced that she would die to atone for the sins of others. On July 1, 1976, Anneliese died of malnutrition and dehydration. He was only 23 years old. Anneliese Michel's death led to a negligence trial against her parents and the priests, who were found guilty of negligent homicide. The case generated a great debate about the nature of his illness and whether the exorcisms were justified or if, on the contrary, they worsened his condition. Anneliese Michel's story has been the basis of several horror films, including The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and remains a chilling case of the boundaries between faith, medicine and mystery.